Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Of course, just 2 more games to go now for Norwich City. I would say thank God. It feels like it's been dragging on now for quite a few weeks. Adam Harvey, delighted to be joined by my colleague Connor Southwell for your preview show this Friday lunchtime. Of course, we want your comments and questions, predictions, whatever it might be, anything surrounding Norwich City, and we'll come around to those towards the end of the show. Connor, to start, I mean, I don't really want to reflect on last Saturday's game for too long, but of course, Wagner came out yesterday speaking about the playoff situation, saying Norwich City don't deserve to talk about the playoffs after their recent performances. Somehow, mathematically, with 2 games to go, they can still get in there, which seems absolutely mind-boggling, bearing in mind, how turgid it's been in recent weeks. Just 1 win in 9, of course. Just want to get your feelings towards kind of the current situation and where Norwich City are at heading into the last 2 games. I mean, how do they approach them?
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird because I think, obviously, I was putting the questions to David Wagner yesterday, and it felt weird to kind of throw a playoff-related one at him, if I'm being completely honest, just because of what the general mood has been like around the place. And I know a lot of people feel it's done. I'm one of those people as well, but I had to ask the question. They're 3 points off. It was just kind of interesting to kind of see what his outlook was. And I think, to be fair, he answered it honestly. And probably summed up where a lot of people are at. And the reality is, I think Millwall are playing Blackpool tonight. If they win that game, and Coventry are at home to Birmingham tomorrow, if they win that game, that would put Millwall on 68. It would put Coventry on 69. I think that would pretty much be all she wrote. And then obviously, if Norwich then drop points tomorrow, then it would be mathematically done. So, it kind of feels like someone's holding a gun at them as a wounded animal, and you're just kind of waiting for them to pull the trigger a little bit. The past week has been really tough, I think, for everybody. And I think you could kind of see that in David Wagner yesterday. I didn't get the sense that he was the same energetic, positive self. The only time really we maybe saw that was when he was kind of invited to talk about the change and the stuff next season. I think when he had to talk about this season, there was maybe a sense of a bit of a fog and a bit of a woe at what has happened over the last week. And I think everyone's bruised by it, everyone's battered by it, whether you're a fan, whether you're sat in the chairs that we're sat in, whether you're Stuart Webber, David Wagner, whoever, the players who I know are hurting deeply at the moment. So, I mean, how did they approach that? Well, it's exactly the same place we were last week. It's about reactions, isn't it? And about trying to get something going. And I made this point at the press conference yesterday with David. I think it's been lost a little bit, but actually Norwich City were playing okay at Middlesbrough until they conceded the first goal. They were playing okay against Swansea before they conceded the opening goal. It was only when those 2 events happened that the performances dramatically dropped to a level that was completely unacceptable, and obviously it spiraled from there. So for me, the challenge has to be, and again, I can't really believe that I'm sat in this position saying this with 2 games left to go of the Championship season, given the expectation, but can they keep it at 0-0 for longer? And can they try and almost build confidence from that? And if, we can get to half time and they're level, or they've even managed to manufacture a place where they're in the lead, can we then see them grow in that level? So that's kind of where I am, actually. And it feels like very back to basic kind of levels. And again, remarkable considering what was expected of this team. But that kind of feels like where we're at the moment. They're so brittle. They're so short of confidence. There's obviously all of the issues playing out in the background as well. In terms of on the pitch, you just hope that the fact that it is done in all but name really will maybe free them up a little bit and give them a little bit of confidence to go out and play. Whether that will happen or I don't know, but I think it's going to be a very interesting 2 games, even if there isn't necessarily a huge amount riding on it.
Of course, they've got a very young squad starting out there. You sort of posed that question to David Wagner yesterday, and he came back saying it's not really an excuse, despite, he's got a squad there of different players as well, playing out of position. Of course, Jakob Sorensen is not naturally a central defender. Just intrigued to sort of get your thoughts on how Norwich set up team-wise going into these last 2 games. Of course, you've got the Timu Pukki element, which has kind of gone under the radar, just 2 games now to go of his Norwich City career. You obviously got experience still on the bench as well. The likes of Isaac Hayden, Sam Byram are now back, both experienced pros in terms of certainly the Championship. So how does he go, going into these last 2 games? Does he stick with this young squad and maybe some of these players will be involved next season and they'll maybe learn a little bit from these last 2 games? Or does he go down the other route of still, trying to sort of put in good performances and maybe he needs that experience in this squad?
Yeah, I think he'll go down the latter route. I think, given what we see, I think it was the youngest, because the Norwich only had 3 players who were over 23, I think, against Swansea, if I'm right. Angus Gunn, Onel Hernandez, and you might have to help me with the other one, but there was another one in there. Sorensen, that was the other one, from the Swansea game. So that's an incredibly young group, however you spin it. And so maybe in that regard, it's not a surprise that we see this Norwich City team struggle with adversity and the emotions run so high and run so low, whether they score or whether an opponent scores. Because I think this season, actually, you look at the moments where Norwich City have performed best, it's usually been after they've scored a goal or they've managed to establish their dominance within a game at points. And then the flip side of that is obviously what we've seen in the last few weeks, where they concede a goal and they drop to such a low level. Obviously, they've got a teenager, or he's not a teenager, he's 20 now, isn't he, as a captain? So a very, very young player kind of wearing the armband. So with all that in mind, and given what we've seen and given what he said about inexperience, I think we will see Isaac Hayden. I think although I didn't necessarily get the sense that that's what we'll see tomorrow, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Sam Byram in some capacity at some point, just to try and get a little bit more experience in there. And actually, you look at the moments where he's had a lot of options available to him, he has kind of erred towards the caution and playing experience rather than perhaps the risk factor that we've seen Norwich City head coaches opt for in the past, Daniel Farke probably most namely, where he would be willing to throw in a young player, irrespective of how the side looked. So I think we'll see that tomorrow, given what they're going to face at West Brom, which is a side who are going to be absolutely fighting for their lives, really, in terms of trying to break into that top 6. I think just to try and solidify it a bit, get the spine in a bit, make sure that the performance is a bit better. Dropping an Isaac Hayden in, dropping a Sam Byram in, I think makes a lot of sense. I think it would then free Sorensen up to play as a central midfielder, and then you could push Gabby Sauer on a little bit, and maybe have that as a midfield free. I think as a midfield free, Hayden, Sorensen, Sauer feels pretty solid. It feels particularly given West Brom have Malumbi and Yokusulu, isn't it? Who's both very, very talented players at this level. So I can see that being a really important battleground. So with that in mind as well, I think that central area of the pitch, just solidify it, just try and make or ensure that you get a performance, or make sure the result isn't maybe as or doesn't explode in the way that it has done in the last few weeks. So I could actually absolutely see him going down that route. And I think it would be a necessity as well. Obviously, then you could keep Onel Hernandez in. Probably some debate about who comes in on the right, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Sargent there and then Pukki up top. I think that gives Norwich a little bit more of an experienced look about them, and hopefully one that could be really effective in a game that actually I think they might have some success on the counter-attack. So, or mind you, we were sat here saying that about Swansea last week. So, yeah, I think it's a game that probably lends itself a bit more to the experience. And then when you play Blackpool at home, it's going to be the Temo Pukki farewell show, isn't it? Blackpool could well be down by then. So yeah, it feels like 2 games where there's not a whole load to play for, other than the fact that the end of season's in sight, and I think everyone's kind of longing for it a little bit at this stage.
Yeah, before we turn the attention back to the game, just want to talk about a man who Wagner spoke about yesterday. Of course, Kieran Dowell was linked to Rangers during the week. His contract, of course, is up at the end of the season. I'm just going to play that clip now, and then we'll get into it.
At the end of the day, I don't like to speak now in this week about certain individuals, but I know what's going on behind the scenes. But I don't like to speak about Kieran or any other individual where the contract runs down, or even when the contract doesn't run down. So I think let's be focused on West Brom and not on individuals.
Yeah, what's your take on that, Connor? Because there's a lot of people on social media that kind of took that as maybe he's off, and that's maybe that. I mean, there's kind of been that criticism leveled at Dowell, certainly in terms of his pace. He's not obviously the quickest player, which for David Wagner's side that will probably want to press high next season, maybe that doesn't quite suit. But then again, when he arrived, he was probably the key man under David Wagner for sort of the first 7-8 games until the injury. So yeah, what's your take on that response from David there?
Well, first and foremost, a really interesting change in tone. He was asked about Kieran Dowell before the Swansea game, I think, and he said that they were in conversations, which felt a much more positive message than the one that maybe has been pushed out this week in light of obviously Rangers' interest. For me, and I've always kind of felt this, I felt if it ran this late into the season, it would probably be unlikely that he would stick around. I think he's probably one that would like to consider his options and probably would get some decent options. If Rangers are at the table, I think that would be very difficult an opportunity for him, given where Norwich City are in their current guys, not able to offer him Premier League football or anything like that, that would be a very attractive move for him, I think, at this stage of his career, if I'm being completely honest. So he is an interesting one, because I remember speaking to him, I think it may have been after Manchester United last season, and he was asked kind of about his future and whatnot. And he spoke about how he had so many loan spells in his career in kind of the early stages, and he came to Norwich, and the idea was that he kind of made it like a home. He spent a few years here and kind of progressed his career within Norwich. And obviously that's really interesting, given the debate that we're having now, and whether he still sees it that way. Obviously, Norwich have changed. Sometimes a fresh bit of scenery, talk of change at Norwich anyway. So they may well have taken the decision, irrespective of those conversations, to go down a different direction, because all of those aspects that you've spoken about there. But there's no denying Kieran Dowell, and you can get him in form, as we saw under David Wagner. Him and Onel Hernandez really made that Norwich side tick. And he's a quality player at this level, I think, irrespective of fitness and whatnot. He's at a really good age as well, 25. I've always felt if there was a deal to be done and Norwich could get it done, that they should, because at the end of the day, I think he is someone who, he's not going to, at this moment in time, he's not going to attract you the type of transfer fees that Norwich City's players have commanded in the past, but he's certainly one that you would get a return on, I think, if he found a little bit of form. So to lose him for nothing, I think, would be a little bit of a kick in the proverbials. It would be a shame. Park all of that kind of financial aspect. The key aspect is he is a player who David Wagner got a tune out of and got an uplift out of. So if he walked away this summer, I think there would be concern that, again, it would be another one to kind of recruit. But really interesting. I didn't necessarily take it to be as conclusive as maybe some people have taken it, although I understand why they haven't, because, as I said right at the start, it's a completely different message to what we heard last week. So it's a really interesting one. I know how hard Michael Beale pushes for players. If he's pushing, I think you feel wanted and you know about it. So, one to watch. But I would expect that this time next week, before Blackpool, we will have a clear idea as to who of those out-of-contract players. It's him, Sam Byron, Michael McGovern. I think they're the only three, unless you're going to correct me, and some youth players as well. So I think we'll have definitive answers on all of those. But we're sat here on the penultimate week of the season. You would feel if they haven't got players tied down to contracts already, as they have done with Onel Hernandez, it probably feels like it's moving in one direction. Obviously, whether it pans out like that is probably a different matter.
Yeah, we'll speak about kind of next season towards the end of the show, but just going to move it back towards the game of course, West Brom are the opponents this weekend. They're also not in the greatest form, just two wins in their last 8, which for, again, a side that was sort of pushing towards the playoffs at one point, it feels like they probably hit a bad spell of form at the wrong time of the season. Of course, the two sides met back in September, different managers in the dugout that day. Steve Bruce, of course, was kind of a very heavy criticism and was very shortly removed of his position there. And they brought in Carlos Corberán, and things have really changed for them, because at that point it looked really, really bleak. But so I suppose, what have you made of West Brom this season, Connor? Because they've kind of been a bit hot and cold, almost a little bit like Norwich City have been.
Yeah, and I remember saying after that Carrow Road game, actually, it was inevitable at that point that Steve Bruce was going to go. His comments in the media, the kind of pressure that was being put on from fans, they were in the bottom 3, weren't they? All of those kind of aspects. And I remember saying at the time that if a head coach could go in there, I don't think it would take a lot to get them going in the right direction. And I think we saw that. They were kind of trailing Middlesbrough, weren't they, for a period of time in terms of points and stuff. They've fallen away a little bit. But actually, what's been a constant throughout Carlos Corberán's time at the club has been a really, really strong home record. The defeat to Sunderland last week was only the second time they've lost at home. They've recorded 8 or 9, I think, clean sheets under him this season, defensively so strong as well. And it bodes such a tough test because, as you say, it is kind of do or die for them. They need to win that game. That would put them on 66 points, and it would kind of take them to the final day in terms of the playoff picture when a lot of the teams face each other. So I think they'll still believe that there's a chance they can get in. That being said, 2 defeats in the last week have made it slightly difficult for them. Financially, I think there's some issues going on around their owner and just the general state of that football club as well. So I think there's that extra push as well. Corberán's an excellent coach, really excellent coach. We saw what he did at Huddersfield, but I'd even go back before that, Leeds 21s and working with Marcelo Bielsa. I mean, you're not a talented coach. If you're working with Marcelo Bielsa, there's no doubt about your talent and what you can do from a coaching perspective. And I think we've seen that really in one championship or one specific championship season with Huddersfield, taking them to the playoff final last year with a squad of players that he had, which isn't too far removed from the one this season that's fighting from relegation. They've lost obviously some key assets like Toffolo and O'Brien, but there's a lot of the same players in there that he took to Wembley. And then this year, West Brom, where he's overseen such an uplift, and they played some excellent football at times, high intensity. They want to dominate the ball. And that's why I think it could be a tough encounter for Norwich at the moment, given where they are and how brittle they are as well. Because if West Brom score, they've lost Daryl Dike, which I think maybe is a little bit of a bonus from Norwich's side as well. If they score, then it does feel like it will go in one direction, unfortunately, and that will probably follow a similar vein to kind of the games that we've seen in recent weeks. But he's an excellent coach. They've got an excellent home record. And again, some people believe in this, some people don't. I think historically, Norwich tend to do pretty well at the Hawthorns. I've certainly seen Norwich win there 3 times, I think, which is rare by my away record. So who knows? I think it's going to be a really interesting one, but yeah, I'm expecting I'm going to use the Daniel Farkerism here, a highly motivated opponent for Norwich City on Saturday.
Yeah, last defeated the Hawthorns was December 2012. I think it was Romelu Lukaku that day for West Brom. So, yeah, over 11 years there since Norwich's last defeat. Of course, there's been spells where they've not played each other due to various yo-yo in between the two sides. Just going to reference a player that's actually on Norwich City's books, but currently out on loan, Bali Mumba. Young League One Player of the Season award. Of course, he won that on Sunday evening. Connor, what are your thoughts on that one? It seems like he's had a really, really productive loan spell. And as kind of David Wagner referenced yesterday, he's excited for next season. The planning's already going on for next season. So just want to get your take on Bali Mumba. Is he someone you can see coming back and sort of having a fruitful spell at Carrow Road next season?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, forget Young Player of the Year for League One. He might be Norwich City's Player of the Year at this rate, given how they've performed. Look, I think that feels inevitable, doesn't it? I think this does feel like the summer where Max Aarons will move on. I think the various kind of reports and whispers that there's probably going to be interest in him this summer, and it feels with 1 year left on his deal, probably unlikely that he would sign a new deal next summer, given obviously where he wants to take his career. And I think most people actually would say, do you know what, that most people would wish him well if that was the decision that he took and the club took. The financial situation as well, he's going to be one of the players that they're going to view as real sort of assets this summer that they can generate some sort of fund for as well. So that would free up a slot at right back, and given Bali Mumba's progress, you've got to give him a look, haven't you? And I've always been really impressed with Bali Mumba, actually. Certainly from an attacking perspective. I think there's always been question marks defensively, and I saw that. I went to watch him when he was on loan at Peterborough, and you definitely saw them exposed on that night in a poor team. But the way David Wagner wants to play, he wants to get his fullbacks high, he wants to get them involved in attacking situations. I think he would be tailor-made for what Norwich City would want. Energy, youthful, pace, really good one-on-one as well, and really good end product as we've seen this season. I think it's, I want to say 8 goals, 4 assists without looking it up. I'll look it up when you next speak, but certainly a really good kind of output this year at Plymouth. And just as you said there in your question, really rave reviews from what he's achieved. So if he's performing like that at the top end of League One, then the next step would be to get him in a championship setting, get him in, have a look at him pre-season, see what David Wagner thinks, and maybe try and get a more experienced option just behind him, just to give him that little extra push, which maybe, I don't know, maybe creates an argument for Sam Byram, I suppose, if you wanted to do it in that way. But yeah, it feels like there'll be a spot for him. And then I guess it will be up to him to take it, but he's certainly done himself no harm with what he's done this season. He's been wonderful, and the few occasions that I've seen him for Plymouth really stood out. And what an achievement it would be more broadly if they could secure promotion to the Championship next season, even if it is another long trip for us, Adam. Hey.
Yeah, exactly that. Looking forward to that one though. Never been down to Home Park, so that will be a good one. Just sticking on Bali Mumba, I remember watching a clip actually from the Swansea reverse game in 2020 at home, where he provided the ball across for Buendia to then lay it back to Stiepermann. Obviously, looking at that clip, prior to last Saturday's game, and I think you could see at that point the raw talent there. But of course, he maybe lacked the experience, but certainly someone who will be key next season. Just dipping into the comments, Daniel saying here, afternoon lads, content's been excellent this week. Helped one of the more difficult weeks to be a Norwich fan. Connor, do you want to jump in?
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and correct myself because Bali Mumba has actually scored 6 goals and 10 assists. So I think I've done him a disservice there actually in terms of his output. But those are some numbers. And sorry, I'll let you go back to Daniel, who's been very kind.
Yeah, we really appreciate that comment. Of course, it's been a difficult week for everyone associated with Norwich City. The sort of toxic scenes at the end of last week's game at Carrow Road is never nice. And we all want the club to succeed, of course, everyone from fans, media to everyone inside the club. So hopefully this summer can be a good one and Norwich can get back on track. Got another question here from the mystery lucky man. Hi, Adam and Connor. Hope you're doing well. Connor, loved your video. Absolutely amazing. We have to take a massive risk in the market. Connor, what's your thoughts on that? Of course, Wagner spoke about that yesterday. They're speaking to players, agents, etc. That the planning for next season is already there. We did obviously speak about it briefly last week, kind of, how they're going to approach it and how maybe it'll be difficult to shift certain players on and bring certain players in. But what did you maybe take from that message from Wagner? Is that kind of a statement that he's going to be here next season? And I suppose the confidence maybe within the club is that they can actually still push in sort of the top 6 maybe next season.
Yeah, I think. To be quite frank about it, it's kind of all they've got, isn't it? You can't really dress up this season as being positive in any aspect or any facet. So if that's the case, you have to forward look and you have to try and get a sort of harness some kind of positivity and some kind of optimism for next season. Obviously, I think there's wider questions. We've discussed all of these at length, really, about whether you would trust the people in charge to recruit appropriately. That being said, I wrote a piece in the week about Stuart Webber and how he has a track record for being a very good change manager. He admits that himself when things need to be fixed, so to speak. He has delivered at various points throughout his Norwich career. Obviously, the caveat of that is, can he do it with kind of the mess that he's presided over and whatnot? Those are all very fair questions. But look, he's recruited for David Wagner's style of football before. They did that very successfully. That being said, and again, just to try and add some balance, the Brexit regulations now has shut off a lot of the avenues that they were able to do that, and also a lot of the avenues that they had success with under Daniel Farke during his time at Carrow Road as well. So they're going to have to kind of pull rabbits from hats, absolutely, and there are going to be risks taken, and that may well mean that it has the prospect of being another really disappointing summer if they're unable to get them all right, and they won't get them all right. They need to get the majority of them right. And it's a summer as well where all of the recruitment is going to be placed under an enhanced spotlight if it is still Stuart Webber making and the decisions and calling the shots. So it's a massive summer, a massive job. And I put this question to David Wagner yesterday: can you do it all in one window? And I know he maybe felt that was a question that was maybe getting a little bit too far ahead of itself, and maybe it is, but I think it's valid because the last time that we saw change, and nobody knows because no one said yet how big it's going to be. But you have to, when someone says change, it feels like automatically, in a football sense anyway, it feels automatically like it's going to be big. We haven't seen kind of a change on that level really since the early years of Daniel Farke's reign, and that took them 3 windows, really, maybe even 4 windows to get that squad where they needed to get in order to be able to go and win the championship title. So the point is, and again, you raise it there, will they be able to marry that up with expectation? Can you come out after a season like this and say, oh, we're going to need time, we're going to need transition, whatnot? And maybe they're laying the groundwork for that, I don't know. Or actually, is it going to be, no, we're going to try and change the squad, but we need to finish in the top 6 of the championship? It's going to be really interesting, all of those facets for me. But yeah, it's going to be a summer where they need to take risks financially. And Norwich always have to with the financial model that they currently exist in. So, no, I'm fascinated. I don't know if excited is the word, but I'm definitely fascinated and intrigued to see what this summer brings. But yeah, I would be shocked if we get to post Blackpool if there's too much time between the final whistle sounding out against Blackpool and a signing being announced. I could see us being in a stage where maybe it shifts quite quickly. And I think in many ways it will need to.
Yeah, Daniel makes actually have another good point here on YouTube. The James Maddison element to, of course, it looks like probably this summer's maybe his time to move. And I think I'm right in saying it's 15% of profit that Norwich City will take. So probably around about depends on fee, obviously, but probably around about 5 million. Well, you feel like that could be quite crucial towards any transfer kitty for the summer, particularly given Norwich City probably won't have many pennies left in the bank. Connor, just sort of round off the show now. feelings towards the game, of course, it's never easy going to the Hawthorns, but as we've already said it, Norwich have a decent record there. Not really much to play for, albeit, playoffs is still somehow on. So just score prediction and thoughts on where maybe the key battles that are going to be in this one.
Yeah, midfield for me, like I say, I think the strength of player they have in there. I really like Jason Mulumby at this level. I think he's an excellent operator. I could see him probably not in this summer, but maybe next summer being touted for some Premier League moves. Just screams of a Bournemouth player for some. I don't know why, but it just feels like that. But it's a really difficult one, and I'm really struggling, if I'm honest, to forecast anything other than a Norwich defeat, just because. And look, as you say, when there's nothing to play for, sometimes you can play with a bit more freedom. I just don't feel that that's going to be the case for this Norwich group. I think they're clearly scarred from everything that's happened this season. There's an ill feeling around the place. It's going to take one goal, isn't it, for it to turn again? So, I'm going to go for a West Brom win. I think 2-0. That's what I'm going to go for, Adam. I'm not feeling too optimistic, but hopefully I'm proven wrong. The fact that it could be pretty much done, not mathematically done as we've already spoken about, but pretty much done by the time they kick off as well. That may well help them, could well hinder them. Who knows? But the fact is, if Norwich don't have a chance of getting in the top 6 and West Brom too, I think that extra motivation that they have will probably swing this game in their favour. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I can't say I'm feeling overly optimistic, particularly after last weekend's performance and sort of recent performances before that. I think I'm with you. I can see a 2-1 West Brom. I think I'd be even more fearful if they had Daryl DK at full fitness, obviously up front. The fact he's going to be missing the game probably gives that Norwich City defence a little bit less to worry about. But obviously they've also got some very good Championship players, the likes of Swift and Jed Wallace, very good at this level in terms of, the top sort of upper echelon of the Championship especially. So not particularly confident, but for me it's the last ground I've got to tick off in the Championship, so that's probably the one positive I'm looking forward to in terms of this one. So with that, we'll round off the show. Of course, we will be at the Hawthorns tomorrow evening. Join us for team news at 4:30. Of course, it's a 5:30 kickoff. So if you not referenced that one, put that in the diary. Lots of other great content across our channels at the moment. Of course, the latest Pinkham podcast was up last week. That's still very relevant now. Lots of other great content actually around the Norwich City space at the moment regarding sort of the board level and other sort of superior people in the football club. Lots of great opinions and comments around that. I done Terrace Talk yesterday with a West Brom fan, so everything you need to know about the Baggies and what we can expect is all in there for you. They're sort of still feeling very hopeful of playoffs, but again, they're only 1 point ahead of Norwich, so they're not in any way secure in the top 6. Ewan Roberts' latest column is up. Chris Sutton's latest column, of course, they're on the Pinkham Plus app. So if you're not a Pinkham Plus app subscriber, then of course, free trial, $1.99 a month thereafter. Come and join the nice community we've got growing over there. And with that, we'll sign off, go get our lunch, and obviously we'll be in bed early ahead of our long trip to West Brom tomorrow. Looking forward to it to an extent, but maybe not the 90 minutes on the pitch. So thanks for joining us this lunchtime. Enjoy your weekend, whatever you're getting up to. And of course, if you're making the trip to West Brom, enjoy your trip. I think the Vines are a great place to go to before the game. So I'm sure lots of Norwich fans will be heading there.
I won't be in there, Adam. Just to say, I won't be in there.
With that, we're going to sign off and we'll speak to you soon.